Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to share how I made these abstract paintings that I want to use as Christmas gifts. These are super easy to make and you don't need many practice and you don't need that much time. I would plan maybe one day because of the drying time, but if you need that present a bit faster, you can always dry your paper with a heat tool or with your hairdryer. I have primed the paper that I'm using. It's a heavyweight paper with gesso, and now I add my first layer with some fluid acrylic paint. If you don't have fluid acrylic paints, that doesn't really matter. You just can use normal paint as well. An abstract painting is usually something more intuitive. For me, it is more intuitive. I just play and enjoy, and I cover up the areas that I don't like, and I try to keep the areas that I like. I start by making just some marks with a contrasting color into the wet surface, and then it's time to let this piece dry. This is also a very good thing you can do while you are making some Christmas cookies. You can always come back to the canvas, add another layer, and then let it dry. And here I'm coming back when everything is dry, and I cover some areas up with just white acrylic paint. I usually cover up areas that I don't like very much. Of course, such a blended background always looks pretty nice, and you don't have to be afraid to cover things up. Again, I let this dry, and as I said, you can dry it with a heat tool. You have to be a little bit careful not to overheat it, so maybe it's better to use just a hairdryer. And here I'm coming back in with a contrasting color. I'm using kind of a complementary tone against the blue-green color, and I decided to just mix it with water and let it drip over my paper, and that's what it's all about. Try different techniques for mark making and for applying your paint, and add different and various layers. There will be always a stage or more stages where the painting looks ugly, but that's totally normal. You just have to make sure that you don't give up. Just keep on painting and you will see the final result will be really pretty. It's always good to avoid creating mud. That means that you don't mix complementary colors when they are wet, because this will create a muddy grayish brown color. That's also important that you are using acrylic paints because they are waterproof when they are dry. This technique doesn't work with watercolors really well. This painting process can also be very relaxing in that busy Christmas time. It's time for the next layer, and I decided to just add scribbles to the background. I'm using a normal pencil, it's waterproof, and I just keep it at the very end and let it do its own thing. There is no control, I just scribble around, and this just adds interest to your whole spread. This is also something that you can do with your kids, maybe for the grandparents. You don't need to be able to draw, and you don't need much experience with painting. This is something everyone can do. I now go in with a water-soluble pencil and make the same marks I've just done before. And I'm using that water-soluble pencil because then you get different effects when you go on top with more water and with other paints. What you also can do when you start the painting, pick the colors beforehand. So maybe search on Pinterest for a nice color palette that you like and then work with these colors. And yes, it looks very ugly, but believe me, you will get a nice finished painting. I'm adding in more contrast with a really dark color. I don't use black, I use Payne's gray, but you can use black if you don't have that many colors. And I try to use different tools to apply the paint. If you don't have that many, search in your home what you find. Maybe you have some makeup brushes you can use, or the backside of a brush could make really nice dots. You will for sure find some interesting things around. If you have stencils, you can of course use some stencils to create extra patterns. I didn't use some here because I wanted to create something that everyone can do without having that many tools. I now go in with another water-soluble pencil. It's a black one, and I dip the nib into water from time to time and also make those scribbly marks I've just made before. And this time I didn't wait for the paint to dry, so I'm scratching into the wet paint and create some other interesting effects. I let everything dry again, and then I come in with a really contrasting color that is popping out from everything else. And I decided to use a fluorescent yellow. Of course, you don't need those fluorescent colors. You can use a normal yellow instead, or maybe a pink would look interesting. And I just add some details, not too much. I don't want to have this in a dominant way. I just want to have some accents of that yellow. And you can see I just use a wooden stick and stamped the circles with it, and then I just scribbled some of the paint with it onto my surface. I now come in with some yellow ochre, and I'm mixing it with my fluorescent yellow, and I just add some more marks. Finally, I didn't like that color, but you will see we can rescue that later. That's not so important. Important is that you have many layers, that you have interesting textures, and when we will cut out the areas we want to use for our painting, then we can work on those areas that we don't like. And now when everything is completely dry, I go in and search for the areas I like the most and the ones I want to use for my painting. And here I'm using just a viewfinder to pick out the squares I like the most. I will use a white chalk pen and just mark the square a little bit at the corners so I can see where I have to cut it out. This time I found two nice squares, and maybe there would have been more, but I think two is enough for now, and I cut out these two squares and then I work on them separately to finish them. Here I've cut both pieces out. I've cut them a little bit larger than I will use them later, and now it's time to finish them up and to maybe repair some areas and to bring in some more interest. I decided to use oil pastels. This is something a lot of people have at home from their kids, and these will work pretty fine. And I just work intuitively. I add some scribbles, I outlined the circles, and yeah, I just enjoy the process. I'm speeding this up a little bit, otherwise the video would become too long. Scratching into the wet paint always brings a lot of interest. I'm using a pastel pencil here, but you can use any pencil you have. If you have some stamps, you can add some stamping to your piece, but that's just optional, so it's not necessary. I decided to pick two background stamps and just add some final touches. What you also can do, if you have it, is add some metallic accents with metallic acrylics or metallic ink. But also this is just optional, and often we have these metallic paints and we don't use them very much, and so this is a good opportunity to use those. And that's the finished first painting, and now we will work on the second one. I still wasn't happy with this orangey color. I didn't like it very much, so I always tried to change it in another way with oil pastels. And I also like that contrast very much, but it was so empty, so I decided to add some botanicals to it, and I just sketched out some quick leaves using a white paint marker. I still didn't like that orange, and I come back in with a little bit more of a red color, and I think that was a good decision. And that's the second painting, and now I have two beautiful paintings to gift someone for Christmas. And they look even more pretty when you frame them. I hope you enjoyed my video today, and I hope you will see us next time. Have a wonderful Christmas time. Bye.